Now, the ORED back here opened up in 2010, and the thrust of this lawsuit is that the owners of the ORED took more in tax reimbursements than they should have.
It is not fair for a developer to improperly submit transactions, wait and see if they get caught, and then offer to repay the money back.
And the city is citing civil RICO laws, and RICO stands for Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations. The criminal version is often used in organized crime cases.
Racketeering activity is broadly defined under the statute to talk about entities and individuals working together in a common scheme for an improper purpose using the U.S. mails or wiring things.
This should never have happened. We should have had a city staff that was on top of this and knew what was going on. This is a failed enterprise.
It was not lost upon us that by filing this civil lawsuit that the federal authorities would likely take interest in this situation, because when you make an allegation that defendants have violated civil RICO, there is also a companion criminal RICO statute that I think most federal prosecutors would take note of, and they did.
When a loophole appears and someone starts exploiting it, it just reinforces mistrust. So I'm not sure how I could even regain my own trust with these kinds of things, let alone the public's.
This was a situation where Mr. Fritzl, over time, continued to push the boundaries of his relationship with the city.
Our office joins Mr. Russell in recommending approval of the settlement agreement and the First Amendment to the RDA. Before I step away, I'd like to thank Mr. Russell and his partner William Denning for their excellent legal advice thus far. They have been tenacious advocates for the city and its taxpayers.
My name is Brad Russell. I am an attorney in Overland Park, Kansas at the firm of Sanders, Warren, Russell, and Shear, LLP. Our law firm and myself were hired by the city of Lawrence to be outside counsel to represent the city in bringing a claim and then eventually a lawsuit against Thomas Fritzl, Tim Fritzl, the OREAD Inn, OREAD Wholesale, and others. Kind of the backstory here is a lot like, I'm sure you've studied the story of Icarus, and that's a pretty apt analogy for what happened to Mr. Fritzl. He obviously entered into a redevelopment agreement with the city, and the purpose of the redevelopment agreement was to provide him an incentive for his business partners to develop the OREAD Inn. Fritzl and his partners developed and invested the money to build the OREAD Inn, the parking garage and areas, and they were to be reimbursed. And the program that reimbursed them was the subject of all this controversy. The original intent of the agreement was that there would be enough business in and around this district because of the building of the OREAD Inn that they would use sales tax revenues generated by business transactions in the district, and then they would reimburse Fritzl and his developers back up to $11 million to compensate them for building the project. So it was a laudable idea to help Lawrence develop. Now, where everything went awry was, much like the story of Icarus who flew too high, Mr. Fritzl found that the revenues generated weren't sufficient to quickly repay he and his developers for the investment they made. So Mr. Fritzl created an entity called OREAD Wholesale.
Several years ago, when this news about OREAD Wholesale came out in the paper, I was curious. They were at the OREAD Hotel, the address, thinking there'd be a warehouse with goods coming and going. So I was up there several times. I actually went twice up to the front desk, and I said, "Where's Orient Wholesale?" And they said, well, they couldn't say anything. Third time I went up there, the manager came down and took me down to Orient Wholesale. I'd be curious to know how many people in this room, how many city staff, how many people watching at home ever went up to look for Orient Wholesale. We went down into the basement, into the parking garage, into a door back into the HVAC air conditioning system, back where they had all the plumbing and stuff. And right on the left was this door that went into a small room. In that room was a desk, a computer, a refrigerator, and a microwave. Nobody was there. They said, "That's Orient Wholesale." I said, "Gee, there's nothing there."
He began over time running all kinds of business transactions through Oriad Wholesale under the guise that those transactions were occurring inside the district, because Oriad Wholesale was physically located within Oriad Inn and therefore in the district. The problem was he would overreach, and he was starting to draw in transactions involving his condo in Colorado. He would involve transactions at his personal residence, others' personal residence. He reached out as far as a car wash in Johnson County, Kansas, and then sought reimbursement for all those transactions through Oriad Wholesale and started getting sales tax reimbursements for those transactions through the district.
So the paper had received an inquiry, a tip, a lead, related to Oriad Wholesale, and they had asked the city some questions about this company that was operating in the Oriad Hotel, and we, as a result, then that's when we began to look into it, and the further that we looked into it, we realized that we needed some auditing help that would assist us, and that's where we got our auditor on board that really began to do a forensic type audit with regard to what actually had occurred and what was going on specifically with the Oriad Wholesale entity.
The lawsuit says some of the owners' bills to the city were wrongful and fraudulent. That's because city-hired auditors think when hotel ownership submitted their data to the city, they were overcharging them by $430,000.
That audit discovered some abnormalities or irregularities. It was after that audit that the city reached out to us to provide an evaluation on the legality of those transactions and the possible remedies that the city might have in regard to what had occurred. We investigated, we worked together with the auditors, and we concluded there were many causes of action that the city could bring against Mr. Fritzl and his entities. So the city council voted and authorized us to bring those civil charges against Mr. Fritzl.
It was at the end of 2015, in December of 2015, that the city decided to pursue filing the lawsuit.
Our evaluation was that the city had very strong evidence. We felt that the audit showed transactions that were clearly outside the district. And we came up with a number of legal theories, and the first one that we thought was most powerful was something called civil RICO, and it's a racketeering charge that is traditionally utilized in going after organized crime figures or drug kingpins. But the notion is that you can't use a variety of different corporate entities to break the law and then hide your criminal transactions by using dummy companies. And we saw an analogy to what Mr. Fritzl was doing in creating Oriad Wholesale. And we felt like that was a charge that was going to put a great deal of pressure on him to resolve this matter. We predicted that Mr. Fritzl, in fact, could not defend the civil lawsuit. He couldn't go through the civil lawsuit because of his criminal exposure. When you file a response to a lawsuit, that document speaks for you as a defendant. Anything that you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. If he made certain representations in that answer, criminal authorities could then use that against him.
So as a result of the lawsuit, as it ended up, we were able to reach a settlement. The settlement was very favorable to the city, I believe. So in the settlement, we were able to achieve a number of things, including Mr. Fritzl had to remove himself as a manager for the Oread Inn, and so the city was involved in okaying a new manager along with the Oread. So that was a significant issue. There was a significant settlement payment that was made to the city in the amount of $650,000. So that amount really covered the city's costs in pursuing the lawsuit, and we wanted to make sure that the city was really made full in that.
I think for this moment in time, this is the best outcome that we can come up with. I am certainly interested in hearing any more about any future criminal cases that may or may not appear, but we don't have any authority over that.
This was a situation where Mr. Fritzl, over time, continued to push the boundaries of his relationship with the city. And seemingly little things got bigger and bigger. And he finally, like Icarus we talked about, flew too close to the sun. He came up with this idea, wow, I can really juice up the sales tax revenue I will get back from this agreement if I just start running all different kinds of transactions through Oread Wholesale. And while he thought that was permissible because he was just trying to pay himself back and his investors back, he ran afoul of the law. And you can't manipulate the law to try to, regain money more quickly. So I think he made that fundamental mistake.